Have you heard about Anchor? Well, it's one of the easiest ways to create a podcast. Not only is it 100% free, but it has a variety of creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or a computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast to other sites such as Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many others for you. And Anchor even allows you to make money from your podcast without a required minimum listenership. So whether you've been in the podcasting game for a long time or you're completely new to it, Anchor is so user-friendly that it's basically your one-stop shop for making a podcast. So what are you waiting for? Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. You're listening to First Fossil. Because sometimes you simply need someone to help you take that first fossil. Hello and welcome to First Fossil, a show where we learn together how to take that first fossil toward becoming the best versions of ourselves. My name is Candice Olushala, and today's special guest is an Australian living in America who left his heart in Africa. Yes, my people, Africa, I'm all for it. He is passionate about seeing people experience life transformation from paradigm shifting ideas or simple little changes that result in something much bigger. He is a podcaster attempting to share some of those paradigm shifting ideas with others to help them live a more abundant and overflowing life. And the Overflow podcast is all about personal growth in a spiritual direction. So without further ado, please welcome my friend, Carl Lindsay. How you doing, Carl? What's going on, man?
What's up, Candice? Good to join you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for being on here. What's been going on with you, man? It's been, gosh, like we met last October.
July.
We met last October at Arise. Then
October,
and then we re-met.
2019.
Oh yeah, that'd be 20. That is 2019. That is so far ago. Wait, no, not even Pandemic. 2019. Wait a second. Let me think. I think we met even further. No, it was 2019. Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Time is weird right now. I don't understand. Yeah. Okay. So that was October of 2019 that we met at the Arise on Andrew University's campus. And then we skipped pandemic, and then re-met in July of the summer. I'm in Tennessee, and it's just been cool to connect with you again. I love that you made the big move to the States somewhere in there.
Yeah, somewhere. Yes and no. I mean, I was already living in the US when we met at Andrews, because so I was used to be running the Arise program in the US. So that was like you just said. Those life transformation moments, that's kind of me that's what I love to kind of create. And so that was what my previous job was. And then pandemic had me waiting for a visa renewal in Australia. And then I came back in January of this year, back stateside. So I'm in California now. But yeah, we connected over in Tennessee at my old boss's event.
Right? That was so cool. That was nice to run into you there, especially after the pandemic and just not seeing people. It was such a great time to connect. So how have things been for you? Like, you've been doing okay?
Yeah, it's been a weird season. I mean, for all of us really, but I transitioned into this new job with the intent of getting this job, which was going to be planning mission trips. But then once I finally got back here during the pandemic in January, we haven't been doing mission trips, of course, since then, because travel has been very limited, especially for large groups. And so my job has not been what it was meant to be. So yeah, it's been an adjustment period, but I am really enjoying the Southern California weather, that's for sure.
Yes.
And yeah, just making building a new community here in SoCal. It's been good.
I love that. Where in SoCal are you?
Loma Linda, so East
Oh,
LA.
oh, dude, you're like down the street from where I am right now. I'm in Ontario.
Oh, we should have done this in person.
We should have done this in person. We're so slow. It's fine. It's all good. It's all good.
Let's press pause now, and I'll
just find meet you. Yeah, I'll meet you down the street here at the El Pollo Loco. We'll just do a little recording there, and that is so funny. Okay, sweet. I love that. Do you like the Loma Linda area?
Look, yesterday was interesting. I actually live in Yucaipa, so it's like 20 minutes up the hill.
Okay.
And it was 61 when I woke up yesterday morning in Yucaipa, and in Loma Linda was like 49. So I was thinking, man, there's a big difference. I like being up on the hill, and because what that does is that layer of smog that LA is famous for kind of stops at the hill.
Oh.
So I'm kind of on the edge of the city, and I'm not a city person, so I like that.
Yeah.
I much prefer to be closer to the mountains or closer to nature. So yeah, it's been kind of fun to be close to the mountains, go for hikes, and then head out to the beach if we need to, if we want to get out in the hot summer days.
Yes, I love that. I have been enjoying the mountain view in Ontario. That's just been breathtaking to me. It actually reminds me of when I lived in Ecuador as a missionary and getting to see the Andes Mountains. It's just my heart. So I really like it out here. It's really pretty.
Nice. Where in Ecuador were you, if I may ask?
I was in Santo Domingo for a year, teaching at the biggest Adventist institution there, Itzacave. That was back in 2011, 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my first pasos that we're going to be talking about today kind of are related to mission, so we can get into that in a little bit. But yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, before we jump into your first pasos, tell the people a little bit about yourself from your perspective.
Sure. Okay, so I am Australian. My accent may have given me away. I mentioned that I've been in Australia last year for the pandemic, but yeah, I've been in the States since 2016, but grew up in Australia, a little bit in New Zealand, with my family there. My dad's a teacher, so in the Adventist education system, so I kind of grew up in that little bubble. So yeah, came over to Andrews University as a way of exploring the world a little bit a few years ago, in 2011. So that was a decade ago now. And then just there briefly, and then I came back to the States as a non-immigrant, but working as an employee in 2016-17. So been here for a few years, enjoying the West Coast. I was in Oregon, now in California. And yeah, I love mountains. We don't have mountains in Australia.
What?
We have, I think the highest mountain we have in Australia is like 7,000 feet. And it's like a hill, really.
That's a hill.
So
yeah. I was like, that's a whole hill, y'all. Okay. What?
Yeah. So that's why I can look out my window right here and see mountains, and I'm like, this is beautiful. The rugged beauty of the rocks and snow sometimes in winter. It's just great.
Wow. See, I've never been to Australia, so I did not know that y'all were lacking the mountains. I'm so sorry that you didn't grow up being able to see any mountains. That is a nice little fun fact there. It's on my bucket list to head to Australia. So I'm gonna know to not look for any type of hiking mountain.
I mean, there's mountains, but they're just they're hills.
They're little mountains.
It's proportionate.
Proportionate. No, that's horrible. I'm crying. I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that. But you have a very vast, very eclectic background, and I really like that. So I'm very curious about. You said you actually had two first paso experiences. So Can you unpack that
Well,
for
I mean,
us?
I think everybody has lots of first steps they take in life in different
Yeah.
ways. And as you, when you asked me, I was trying to think of something, a couple to share, and I came up with a list of 5. But um, I was like, wait, maybe we could talk about this, maybe we could talk about that. But yeah, so I have a couple. I don't know how you want me to like start talking about them, but uh,
How?
that's where I'm coming from.
Okay. So do they connect with one another?
So I said before, like they connect in the way of mission. So one kind of led to another, like a year or so, a couple of years later.
Okay. So then let's start with that first one and then talk about how it transitioned into the next first fossil.
Yeah. So if we go back to maybe, I think it was 2008, and 2008, 2009 was my first and second year of college. So just late what was I, 19 or 20, somewhere there. In my that transitional period of life, trying to figure out where I was going, what major I'd be studying, this kind of thing. And one of the first things that happened at the end of that first year of college was that I was just sitting down reading a magazine. I was reading an ADRA newsletter. ADRA is the Adventist Development and Relief Agency, and so they do a lot of development work around the world. And so their cover story was titled "Unlike Anywhere Else." I was a business major at the time. I did well in math in high school, and so that was numbers kind of my language. And this article had a number of statistics, and so it was like as I was reading them, I was just blown away because they were doing was they were comparing statistics from Australia, where I was at the time, and then Africa, or sub-Saharan Africa, I should say, and just contrasting the poverty. One of the statistics was comparing the amount of money that Australians put into a parking meter just to pay for parking during the day, comparing with how much people were making in Africa. And I think it was every hour. I'm just going to read it to you. Let me pull it up real quick.
I'm nervous for this statistic.
Okay, so this is crazy, right? 70% of sub-Saharan Africans are eking out a survival on less than $1 a day. And we feed more money into an Australian parking meter each hour than nearly half the world's population makes in a day. So that statistic goes back to 2008 it was. So it might be different now, but still it blew my mind, right? It's I could read more of them here, but that was the one that really hit me the hardest. And I think for me, what that kind of led to was taking the step of changing my major. There were lots of other things that kind of led to this decision. We can talk about those later. But that moment was like, okay, I need to do something about that. And so I'd never been to Africa at the time, but I jumped on the college website and was looking up different programs. And the next day I went into the business office and changed my major, or added a major. I was going to be doing business management and business majoring in IT, information technology, but I dropped that and added international poverty and development studies. So became a double major or double degree, I should say. And that was what I started pursuing over the next 3 years of my schooling.
So that one statistic really jolted the trajectory of where you thought you were going originally.
Like literally, like I was in high school. Coming out of high school, I was like, okay, I'm going to do business management, business IT. I'll have I'll graduate. I'll get a high-rise office job in Sydney somewhere, because we lived like an hour north of Sydney, Australia, and I'll be driving a nice car. when I was 18, I was like, I'll be married by 30, kids, whatever. Just the Australian version of the American dream is how I like to describe it to some people. And
It sounds
that
just
was
like our
literally it.
dream, though. That sounds like every
Yeah,
high school boy's dream. Like, I'm just gonna have a nice old fancy car. I'm gonna have a good girl on my side. I'm gonna have a lot of money, and it's gonna be great.
exactly, right? That was I don't know how I developed that, but that was the idea at the time. And that moment, or that semester, I should say, kind of turned that on its head.
Mm-hmm. And so that first fossil was the changing of your major.
I suppose so. And the thing that came directly out of that was a mission trip to Africa the next year.
Wow.
So this was actually the thing I wanted to talk about. Was I went to Mozambique. I got the opportunity. So as I said, I was in business as well, and the business department was taking a trip to Europe in the following mid-year break, which for us is in July. So it was the northern summer. So we are going to do a summer Europe trip, and because you're doing it through school, there was the opportunity to take loans and put it all on loans. And so that was like an opportunity. And then it ended up being that my church was also doing a mission trip to Mozambique, as I said, at the same time. So I had to choose one or the other. But one of the things that I learned in my economics 101, as you do as a business student, I learned this idea called opportunity cost. And opportunity cost is the loss of potential gain from other alternatives when one alternative is chosen. So have you heard that term before, or that idea?
I remember this term from Economics 101.
Yeah. So it's what someone sacrifices when they choose one option over another. It's like I can choose A or B, but even if I choose A, that's just we often talk about pros and cons, but what we don't talk about is the cons on A should also be the pros on B, because you're missing out on those
Right.
when you cross. And so for me, to choose to go to Mozambique meant I was missing out on the opportunity to tour the Volkswagen factory and to have a whole bunch of nice time in Europe with friends. But if I was going to go to Europe and I skipped Mozambique, then I would miss out on the opportunity of serving people. And that's ultimately what it came down to. I was like, my time is better spent in service to others. And so I said, maybe I'll visit Europe one day with other people, other opportunities.
Yeah.
But I chose to go to Mozambique and never looked back since. As I told you, as I put in my bio, I'm an Australian living in America, but I left my heart in Africa. And Mozambique, or I haven't been back to Mozambique actually, but Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, has like taken a piece of my heart, and I've been back to different countries over and over again.
I completely understand that, leaving your heart in those places. My heart is very much still in Ecuador. I tell people Ecuador is like my second home. I don't know who I would be without having had that experience living there.
Right.
My worldview is so different compared to how it was before. Even though I had immigrant parents who, especially like my mom, she grew up on the islands, and so the culture on the islands and the mentality in Ecuador were very similar to what she taught us through stories.
Okay.
But then living it myself, it just like all the light bulbs were coming on from what she had taught us from what she experienced as a child on the island. So I completely resonate with that I've left my heart back in Africa mindset. And unless you've been a missionary, it's hard to really explain the depth of what that even means.
Yeah. That's it. And I think what happened was it just, when you go and you're in a new culture, even just traveling, you learn so much. But then if you're there actually interacting with the people on a more intimate level on a day-to-day basis, it is the next level.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah.
How did that experience lead you into another step?
Yeah. So I suppose we had, so that was Mozambique, and then part of my new degree and that field of study meant that I went back as a short-term intern in Uganda. So just kept falling in love with the African cultures. But I came to actually let me go back to that moment when I was sitting in the couch in 2008. I kind of was like, okay, like I said to you before, I need to do something about this. And Africa became my long-term vision, my long-term goal. And I got a friend, actually, he's Botswanan or Setswana, I think that's how. Anyway, he hates when people just say Africa because it's such a big continent. But so for me, but it was the sub-Saharan, those cultures were really important to me. But what I was envisioning was me moving to Africa as some kind of more long-term career missionary one day. And I think what God does is he puts a dream in our hearts for the next step. Like, we're talking about steps today. And I think what I've learned is that God doesn't say, okay, this is where you're going to end up. He says, okay, now from go point A to point B, and he'll get you to point C in order to get you to point D. He doesn't say, okay, let's just jump straight to D. And so I think taking me to putting this dream of Africa in my heart was a way to get me to move forward with certain ideas and mindsets and viewpoints, because I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't take that on. I am still not in Africa as a missionary, but I don't think that's a failure on my part. It's just, maybe that'll happen, maybe it won't. But for me, it's more about the putting the one step in front of the other. And so one of those steps that I got to was landing in Michigan, Southwest Michigan, Andrews University, as a student in the spring of 2011, sitting in church there and listening to Dwight Nelson preach. He preached the sermon series that year on being a missionary. And I don't know, I think it was all timing. Just God had me there at that time. And I was literally, this was my last year, my senior year of college. And I was there just for one semester as an exchange student. Then I was going to finish, go back home and graduate in December. But God kind of said, no, how about you think about going to be a student missionary? And so, yeah, I started seriously thinking about it. I looked at all the different options and applied and ended up being accepted, getting through the process and everything. And later that year in August, I was on a plane trip to Kenya as a student missionary for 10 months. Yeah, that was the next big thing that now, 10 years later, I've looked back on that decision to delay my graduation as one that has affected the rest of my decisions in life.
Yep. Oh, my word. So wait, you were a missionary in 2011, 2012?
Yeah, same time you were in Ecuador.
Oh, my star. So we both delayed our senior year because we both graduated in 2013 then. I guess December 2012 for you, or would that have been still 2013 when you came back to graduate?
December 2012, because I only had one semester left.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I graduated May of 2013. So
Yeah.
that is wild. Oh my word. Okay. My head is spinning because you had mentioned how what you what you said. I don't say it necessarily completely counteracts what society says about just following your passion. And when they say that, it's like, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? Right. There's this like drive, and like everyone just goes for this one thing. And you said, like, no, God can often place a passion in you from here to here. And then when you get to where that point B is, he's like, okay, let me ignite something else.
New,
and like and like as you go, you're sometimes you can't tell, like, how are these connecting? Like, are they supposed to connect? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you won't know until you get to like point F, right? Like there's like all these different steps, and then you go back, you look back, and you go, oh, that's why we did all of that.
I heard a quote. You reminded me of a quote I heard the other day from Scott Harrison of Charity Water. He, this is something that has inspired him that he saw somewhere, but it's the idea of never being afraid of work that never ends. And so for him, he is taking on the challenge of giving every person in the world clean water. For me, in the mission element, it's kind of, in the Christian context, it's trying to tell everybody about Jesus, and it's work that never ends. But to this conversation right now, it's an ongoing journey that will never end. We might get to Z, and then what happens after Z? Well, you think you've arrived, but in Microsoft Excel, it goes to AA or AB and AC, right?
Yes, it never ends.
And so it's just a long journey. And if God gets you to where he wants you, that doesn't mean that you've arrived. It just means that there's an opportunity for him to reveal what's next. The next door will open.
That's a word. Yes. Like you've not necessarily arrived. And it's, and I think that's what gives us the momentum to keep feeling like we've gone and we've gone and we've gone until you get to that moment where it's the well done, good and faithful servant. Because it's not I think it's not necessarily about you completing the work as much as it is you completing your work that's been given to you to then pass on the trajectory of what keeps going after you. Like it's beyond you and it's beyond what you've done, but what is it that you've been set forth to do that's going to provide a platform and a foundation and some substance for the next person who needs to continue this continuous work that doesn't really have an end. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yep. Let me give you this quote from C.S. Lewis. This is the quote that I saw when I was a student back at Andrews that really made me think, okay, yes, I'm going to go. I'm going to put off my studies. Because I was like, okay, I'm going to graduate this year, which would have been 2011. And I was thinking, okay, and then I'll go to Africa basically straight away after that. And so I was like, why go to Africa now when I could just go soon? But this is what I saw somewhere. I don't remember how I found it, but this kind of came in across my path. And Lewis says, the great thing, if one can, is to stop regarding all the unpleasant things as interruptions of one's own or one's real life. The truth is, of course, that what one calls the interruptions are precisely one's real life, the life God is sending one day by day. And so we're at like point B and we're trying to get to point D. We think it's, no, wait, we're at point B, we're trying to get to point C, but really that point C is point D and God's got a point C in the middle, like that middle spot, right? And it's like, okay, that is not an interruption. That's just where God's leading us day by day.
Oh my word. You're speaking to me right now. Like, oh, I'm itching. this is very much hitting where I am in life with,
Mm,
oh gosh, with literally everything. And like you had said earlier, that that decision to become missionary completely shifted the trajectory of the rest of your life. That is what Ecuador did for
yeah.
me.
Mm,
And it's, man, it is a wild hearing what you said. And I'm having these light bulb moments thinking back on my decade since, cannot believe that it's been a decade since we were
yeah, right.
missionaries, but like it feels like it was yesterday. Um, but thinking back on how pivotal my year in Ecuador was. And
Mm,
at that point, I would have not thought that I would end up where I am right now,
yeah.
given that decision at all. Like I would not have been able to see the correlation to why that decision was made then to why I'm where I am now.
But you know what's funny, and I bet you're the same, is that we sit here a decade later and look back and we're like, life hasn't turned out the way I would have thought it would have, but I don't regret it. Not at
Not a
all.
second.
Yeah.
Nope. Nope. All my little
And
plans that I had,
no
hardly any
big
of them
deal.
happened. And this one is better than what I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's the idea. God is sending us, leading us on this path day by day, and we get to these valleys of decision or this intersections, and we say, okay, A or B. What's the opportunity cost? What's the is this an interruption? Those two ideas kind of stuck with me throughout the years, and it's like, okay, no, this is the best decision for today.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point to make because I think a lot of people have anxiety about this decision is going to shift the trajectory of my life, and they make it into like a Lifetime movie in their brain, right? Like, oh my word, like what is this going
Right,
to
and it
be?
does, but doesn't have to be thought about like that.
Right. And it can be very I don't know, it can be, if you're making your decisions, this is how I think about it. If you're making your decisions with good intent, that
Hmm.
I've weighed out as best as I can. I've prayed about it. I have peace about it, or I'm neutral about it. Like nothing in me feels like I have any kind of oomph to know exactly which way to go, but I'm gonna lean towards this with the with the understanding that I'm stepping in this direction for these reasons that make the most sense to me with where I am right now in my life, and knowing that God is gracious enough to say,
Hmm.
awesome, like make that decision. I am with you. I'm walking with you. And I have plans. Like I still have
Yeah,
plans. And I'm going to reveal them at different stages of this walk. And you making life decisions, and that it doesn't have to be the worst. Just, I can't believe I made this. Like, no, we've learned something. We've
yeah,
grown. We've evolved. We've matured. We've gained knowledge we wouldn't have had we not. So
exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I think that's amazing.
And where one of the other first steps that I was contemplating talking about, I'll just mention real brief, is the idea of back 4 years ago, I just started reading a little bit more intentionally. I shouldn't say a little more because I barely was reading before, but a lot more intentionally. Um, and that reading encompasses listening and podcasts as well, but audiobooks and the odd actual hard copy book too. But learning, that was my way of learning, and it has changed my thinking, and it's been such a blessing. So I would encourage all those listening, to really take today as an opportunity to learn, we're coming up, I don't know when you'll release this episode, but it's the new year around the corner for us as we're recording. And so beginning of 2018, I said, I'm going to start listening to audiobooks. I'm going to listen to 24 this year. And I didn't make that goal, but I started at it. And the different books that I read changed my thinking, changed the way I interacted with people, set me on a path of personal growth that is not yet over. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the journey.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I love that. And do you have advice for listeners who might feel like the idea that they had of where they were going seems like it's being shifted, or that they're being pulled in a different direction and they just aren't sure what to do with this very pivotal mindset shift because it's so different from what they pictured?
Yeah. It's a challenge in those moments. I have to cast my mind back to Africa. One of the things you learn in Africa if you spend enough time there is, especially in Kenya, we on the staff there, or maybe it was actually an African saying, I don't know, but they used to just say TIA, this is Africa. And in just when things didn't go expected. And so it's like, people aren't showing up on time, or we got stuck in the mud while we were out in our 4-wheel drive, whatever the case may be. This is Africa. Things are different here. And so what I learned in Africa, in Kenya, in Zambia, Mozambique, these other places, was that I had to learn to expect the unexpected. And so when those times come when you feel like things are uncertain, it's kind of like riding a wave. You just have to take it as it comes and see where it's going. Like I said, that quote from Lewis, just look up C.S. Lewis interruptions and you'll find that quote. And because that really is the way I see life, is that interruptions, these times in life where it's a little bit unstable, God's got this, and he's there in front of you, and he's leading you step by step, and he's not going to walk away from you. So that's my thoughts at the moment for people in those kind of circumstances. Just take it day by day, and I guess in that regard, take everything to God in prayer as well.
Yeah.
For those big decisions. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I appreciate you sharing that experience, and it's experiences that a lot of people can resonate with. And honestly, guys, for us, it's experiences like being missionaries, but you don't necessarily have to have a missionary experience to have a personal shift in your life and to be redirected or guided in a different direction than you maybe had pictured. And I know that it can get very overwhelming too for the way that society makes us feel like we have to go on one path from the time we are 4, and then you just keep on that path until you retire, and then you die. Like that is what we're taught. And it doesn't have to be that way.
If I can say to that, the idea there is, many people have probably observed this, but especially those coming out of high school now, if you've been taught that's probably something coming from an older generation. There's the people in their late 40s to 60s. They're the kind of people who are stuck in one career all their life. This is obviously statistically speaking, not individual cases by case, but today's world, the Gen Z and millennials are kind of on a trajectory to have 20 or 30 different careers, or not careers, I shouldn't say, different jobs in their life. And so that can change. You can change your career, but it's not something that you should be concerned about if you're stressed about choosing the right major when you're moving into college next year. say, yeah, you don't have to make that decision right now and think it affects the rest of your life.
And even those who are already in the workforce who feel like, I don't think I'm supposed to be here anymore, and yet I'm here. Okay, well, then that's okay if you end up saying, I'm not doing this anymore and I'm going to go do something totally different. It's absolutely expected because you're evolving and experiences are changing. The world is changing. The world at large is changing. Our personal worlds are changing. You are changing. So
Mm-hmm.
expect what you do to change and also allow it to stretch you and grow you in the process. And just like you said, learn at every step of the way that you can.
Yeah.
Soak it in. Man, thank you so much for coming on my show today. How can people contact you, find you on social media if they want to reach out to you to ask questions and stuff?
Yeah, sure. Instagram is probably the best place to find me. I am not going to be on Facebook for much longer. But IG at Carl J. Lindsay is me. And you can find our podcast, the Overflow Podcast, which is the handle is at Choose to Overflow. So that's
awesome.
At Carl J. Lindsay. Oh, actually, I should mention Carl with a K. Carl J. Lindsay and at Choose to Overflow.
And Lindsay with an A instead of an E.
Yes, Lindsay. That's right.
There you go. Boom. Because the people will just be spelling however they want to these days, acting like Starbucks. So, yeah. Okay. So Carl J. Lindsay or at Choose to Overflow on IG. You can absolutely find him. He's really fun and very kind. So please reach out to him if you want to. And thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. If you want to hear more topics like this, any situations, any questions that you want me to address on this show, if you have people that you want me to talk to on the show, absolutely DM me on Instagram. You can find me at First Fossil or even my name at Candace Olushala. And you can also email me, hola@firstfossil.com. And then you can always shoot me a text at 859-800-3396. Let me know how you feel about this episode. If you've had any experiences similar to Carl's, or if you have thoughts about it, things that you've been trying to figure out personally and start a conversation. I would love to hear from you guys. And you can always go to my website at www.firstfossil.com to learn more about all the different things that I'm doing right now since my transition out of working as a full-time pharmacist and stepping out and doing this shift that we've just been talking about this podcast. So thank you guys so much for listening. Please stay safe. The Rona is not playing with us still. She's out here just evolving. Mm-hmm. She's evolving and maturing and learning and growing too. So
be careful.
I'm telling you, hey, watch out, okay? Please enjoy the holidays with your families and loved ones. And we will see you guys soon. Carl, we'll talk soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great.
Thanks. Bye.